Hello and welcome to Content and Capable, a podcast where I try to figure out what it means to really be an adult. Today our guest is Mary Clay, otherwise known as MC. She and I talked all about starting a podcast and the adventures she had with reading a prolific series. Welcome to Content and Capable, MC. How are you going?
Woo! It's my life has been. You're talking to me in probably like one of the most stressful, I don't know, like 3-week periods of my life because I have so many things happening at once. So if I'm all over the place, I apologize.
Well, like it's the same for me as well. The next 3 weeks are, super stressful. As of time of recording, I've just had a new baby brother who's born, although the podcast hasn't even come out like properly yet. The first episode comes out in a couple days' time. So, but like I've got that and like finals for uni and then maybe a new job. And so there's like so many different things happening. Like I'm struggling to keep up with it all.
Same. I feel that. Yeah.
And just like, I don't know whether you do this, but when I get bored, I start signing up for things. I was like, and it must have been like a month and a half ago. I went, I'm bored, so, I'm going to sign up for a couple of things. So I have, and now like those commitments are coming back to bite me. I'm like, whoo, that's a commitment I've got to fulfill. But yeah, it was just not, it's been a wild ride the last couple of weeks.
Well, hopefully by the time that this episode comes out and you're listening to it, both of our lives are much more improved than they were at the time that we were recording this.
Let's hope that.
Fingers crossed.
So, how do you feel like you've become an adult? Is this like a really, really tough question?
That's a really like loaded question for me because honestly, I still don't feel like an adult in a lot of ways. Yeah, like I said, this is like a very interesting, like literally, like specifically like today and just like this past week and like the next 2 weeks is just a very interesting time in my life where I will be starting a new job actually. So we're recording this on a Saturday and on Monday I start a new job and it's a very, not that my work experience up until now hasn't been like quote unquote real jobs and not that, you need an office job for it to be a quote unquote real job. There are people who make livings doing lots of things that don't involve an office job or health benefits or stuff like that. But I am starting that and I'm transitioning from I was working in the nonprofit sector for like 4 years. 4 years basically. And now I'm going into a corporate job. And so that does make me it is weird how that makes me feel like more of an adult. And they are saying things like, oh yeah, we offer like 401ks. And I'm like, I don't know what a 401k is. I don't even know if that's a universal thing. Like, I don't know if they have those in Australia.
No, they definitely don't. But they can still manage to stuff up the 401ks here in Australia. So.
Yeah, so I'm like, I don't know what a 401k is. And I also, in America, you can stay on your parents' or guardian's health insurance plans until you are 26. So I just turned 26 this spring and I just got off my parents' health insurance and I'm still scared. Like, I don't know how to use my own health insurance. I'm like, I don't know what any of these terms mean. I don't have a credit card, so I don't have a credit score. So like in a lot of ways, I am not a functioning adult. I am very much, I identify completely with Nick Miller from New Girl. I do not know how to take care of myself. I have to chop up vegetables into tiny pieces and put them, like hide them in like my spaghetti sauce or something in order to put nutrition into my body. Yeah. So in a lot of those ways, I'm not an adult. But in other ways, like I live, well, I don't live on my own, but I have roommates. I'm not, living at home with my parents. I'm pretty independent. I can like go out and I can drive, like I have a job. A lot of those things do. So being an adult, all that rambling to say is that like the term, being an adult is very not ambiguous.
No,
is
yeah,
the word I'm thinking
100%.
of. Yeah.
And like it depends on like the culture that you've grown up in as well. Like for myself, like I could consider myself an adult, but then at the same time, I call my mother up every second day when she's not in hospital. Asking her questions. I actually work in the non-profit as well. I work for a community radio station. So the profession I want to go into, journalism, I actually haven't been paid for that work since I've started doing journalism. And at the same time, like, I've had to do like these weird adult things, like use the health benefits that I'm given through government assistance and figure out how bank accounts work and choose an electricity plan. That was the other thing I had to choose the other week. I had to choose an electricity plan. So I spent 2 weeks procrastinating doing it. And then I got a text message from my old roommate who's like, are you swapping over the electricity to your name? And I'm like, I've got to do this, don't I? So I sat down. Even then, I got narrowed it down to 2. And I was like, I still can't decide.
Yo, I feel that. I haven't ever had to set up an electricity like account or anything in my name because I've always moved in with people who already have an established account. And so they just transfer it to that current address and we just use their existing account. So as we speak, as we record, I don't know where I'm going to be living when June is over because
that's right, your landlord.
Yeah, our landlord has been terrible. She decided to sell the house that we live in, which is totally her choice, as the landlord. The process by which she went through to sell the house was a nightmare and completely inconvenienced all of us, and she refused to like compensate. She was like, you can get $75 off your rent, and we're like, that doesn't really help much, but okay, I guess I'll take it. She finally, literally yesterday, finally got an offer on the house. Who knows if it'll go through. So at least like that's one stressor that's removed from my life. I don't have to worry about her texting us being like, hey, there are people coming for a showing tomorrow from like 1 to 4 p.m.
At least you get 24 hours notice. I got 15 minutes notice before a house inspection the other day. I got off the train, checked my phone, and I'd just gotten a text message from my landlord who had said, oh, yeah, there's someone to go and inspect the spare room because there's a spare room in my apartment for the last couple of weeks. And I'm like, I've literally just gotten off the train. I was going to go and get some lunch because I'd just come back from work. I was going to go get some lunch and then, make my way slowly back home. Well, now I've got to rush home and clean the dump that is my house because I've just left things everywhere. And he moved in the day after. I'm like I love my roommate now. He's awesome. But just the way my landlord went about things was
landlords are terrible.
Not fun.
I don't even remember what I was saying. Oh yeah, talking about like electricity accounts. And so I don't currently know where I'm going to be living. We're still looking for apartments, and that's its own like total separate thing too. I'm going to have to probably, because my roommate that I'll be moving in with, hopefully if we find a place, I don't think she has a current electricity account for our state because she was living out of state for the past couple years while she was at school. So I don't know if she has an existing account already, and then I'll have to look into setting that up. Oh, I have to get for my job, I have to get something notarized, and that's been a whole process where like I have to call there are like certain locations where you can get something notarized, but it'll like cost a fee. And at my bank, if you're a member of, like, if you belong to a bank, most of the time you can call them up and be like, hey, do you have someone there who can notarize a document? And so I had to like do that, and that's So all that being said, like I don't know what I'm doing.
No. My parents are looking to buy an investment property, for myself to live in, but they have to buy before June because they're making the Olympic announcement for June, and the Southeast Queensland region where I live in Brisbane is set to be where the Olympics will be held in 2032.
Oh, really? Whoa, that's cool.
Which means that as soon as they make that announcement, all the house prices go up by 10%. Well, and this is not even what we're here to chat about. This is the great thing. For those who don't know, how did you get your podcast? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, it's a very like unique story, and I kind of feel bad when people ask me like, "Oh, how did you start your podcast?" I'm like, I had a lot of luck, and I had a lot of people helping me, and a lot of people don't have that. So I guess to preface all of this, I went to the same university with Tyler Carlin and Ethan Edgehill. We all went to the same university. They've been best friends. I never actually even met them. I followed one of them on Twitter at some point because we were all members of our university radio, and we had separate, they had their own, I think it was called like Bro Time, which just is hilarious for me. to think about, and I like rag on them all the time about like, you guys had a radio show called Bro Time. Anyway, and so I think like one of them showed up in my suggested people to follow on Twitter because of that, and because we were like following the same like radio account. Anyway, so that's kind of how we got to be in the same Twitter sphere. I was in a habit of like, whenever I came up with like a dumb idea for a podcast, I would tweet about it. Some of them I'm like, no, that would never be an actual podcast. No, it's just funny to think about. Some of them I'm like, you know what, that would be a good podcast. Let's do that sometime. Anyway, and one day I tweeted, I was like, oh, someone should do a podcast. Or not even someone, but like, this was the thought I had leading up to it. I was like, I came up with the pun, that's what I'm talking about. And I say I came up with, I didn't necessarily come up with that. That pun has already existed. Yeah. But that popped into my head. And I said, oh, that would be a good name for a Lord of the Rings podcast. Someone should do that. But not me, because I know nothing about Lord of the Rings and I don't even think I like it. And then I was like, well, Mike Schubert has been doing Potterless, and he knew nothing about Harry Potter. He didn't really even like it in the beginning. I'm still not really sure if he likes Harry Potter. I'll have to ask him. And so I was like, maybe I could do that. So I tweeted about that. And then Ethan Edgehill saw it and replied and was like, let's make it happen. And leading up to that point, Tyler and Ethan had been on like their own podcast journey. And they had like, they had gone to like PodCon or something, or, you know, some convention where they were thinking about how could we grow our audience or help other people start their own podcasts, or maybe form that into a podcast network of some kind. So that was kind of already brewing in their heads. And so they saw this idea. It was like maybe like a week or two of like us playfully replying to each other's tweets being like, oh, haha, when this like, this would be like a fun thing to make a reality, whatever. And then one day they messaged me and said, hey, are you available to record tomorrow? We'd love to have you on to cover Ocean's 11. And I was immediately suspicious. Yeah. Because I was like, I've never once in my life tweeted about Ocean's 11. I've never seen this movie, but sure. And I was right to be suspicious, because they were using that as my quote unquote audition. They were like, let's make sure she can hold a conversation before we ask her if she wants to make this podcast a reality. So
I just find that so amazing. Obviously, you know, what has happened is amazing. Like, since then is awesome. You know, you've got this amazing podcast, which I don't know whether you remember sending a letter to Australia, but that I was the person you sent the letter to Australia with, and I still keep it. I still have it in a box.
Was it one of the Tolkien of Appreciation postcards? Yeah.
And at that point, I was in year 12 at the time, so we were driving to and from school, and I put the podcast on because there was nothing else. Like, everyone had different choices of music, so I was like, podcast it is. And we all loved you. But, like, very interesting that Tyler and Ethan decided to audition you in that way and decided to approach you rather than you approach them. Because, you know, working with Christina and Charlie and Taylor and Alex and Zach and Carrie, it's very interesting because people are now, like, coming up to us and asking us about podcasts. And we go, oh, so now this is just going to grow itself. So, what are your overall thoughts of Lord of the Rings at this point in time?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I ask myself about that every day. Because I do wonder, I'm like, do I actually like this? Mm-hmm. Or do I just talk about it a lot? And honestly, I don't know. I think it's a great story. I think what Tolkien did for the fantasy genre is incredible. And I don't think there will ever be anything like it. Tolkien was an incredible writer. And I give him a lot of, I make fun of him a lot because he has a tendency to, like, ramble on about things that don't matter. Or he'll just, like, gloss over things that you're like, wait, no, that actually sounded kind of crazy. Yeah. I want to hear more about that. And then he's like, don't worry about it. So I do make fun of him, but he is just such a legend that it is really great to get to read those works. But I don't know. It's really hard now because I don't think I will ever be able to separate the experience that I had surrounding the consumption of Lord of the Rings from the actual story that it told. And I think that was probably for the best, because I definitely I never would have read the books had I not been doing it like chapter by chapter for a podcast. And even if I did decide one day to pick it up and read it, I probably would have stopped. I don't even think I would have made it through the first chapter, I'll be honest. I maybe would have gone on to chapter 2, but...
To be honest, same. I haven't read the book, so I get halfway through the first chapter and I give up.
Yeah, so...
It's just too hard. I can't even read The Hobbit. I don't know what is wrong with me, but I've really, really struggled reading that kind of high fantasy. And... almost like on an aside for that, and maybe another reason why I find it so hard to get into that fandom is because there's a lot of pressure around it because everyone says it's so good. Did you feel that pressure as you did the podcast? Like people going, you've got to like this, or, you know, you felt pressure to give certain sections justice?
Yeah. I feel that more now. Like now that I kind of have a larger following, and I know that, whereas before it was like when I started the podcast, it was pretty much just people who listened to Tyler and Ethan's podcast that were listening. Yeah. And so there wasn't as much of outside people who were huge Lord of the Rings fans who found this Lord of the Rings podcast and wanted to listen to it. And so... I do feel that now where, especially when I started the movies, because I knew the movies are more popular. And that's kind of how we were talking about, like, how difficult it is to read the books. I never, ever give anyone a hard time for not reading the books. Because they're hard. They're hard to read. It's like it's kind of, I mean, in my mind, I group it together with like when I was trying to read like Pride and Prejudice in high school. And I'm like, It
is like that language, isn't it? Yeah.
So like there's that side to it. They're very long. Like I said, he will, it's just so funny how Tolkien will choose certain things to give you so much detail about. And you're like, I don't need to know this. This isn't like, this is fun backstory, but this isn't relevant to the ultimate like story arc of them trying to destroy the ring, you know? Yeah. So, but with the movies, I did kind of feel like I really need to get this right. I really need to cover it well. That was honestly, I would say like October and November, I was not slowly, I think I rapidly went insane because I had divided the movies up before even recording. I was like, oh, I'll do like 3 episodes each, no problem. And then I sat down to record the first 2 episodes, and the first episode went on for 2 hours. And I was like, well, that was because I recorded with Ethan and we're good friends and we probably just talked naturally more than, someone who I don't know. But then I had my next guest on and we talked for, I want to say it was even like 2.5 hours, and we didn't even finish this section. I was like, halfway through the episode, I was like, there's no way we're going to make it to the end of like when I said we would. Let's just stop it here. And so from there, I kept having to adjust all the time periods because I wanted to make sure that we hit everything, that we didn't like miss anything major. Like we didn't, in that episode I was referring to, how we recorded for like 2.5 hours. We didn't even talk about you have my sword and my axe and my bow. And that's like one of the most major moments for the fandom from these movies. And we totally glossed over it because there was so much to talk about. And so that's when I started just dividing it up further and further and further, to the point where I think in Return of the King, it was getting down to like 30-minute segments of the movie. And even that, we were still filling out. I expanded the movie episodes to be an hour and a half, because most of the recordings were going for 2 hours. And I was like, there's no way I can cut out a full hour of that. Let me at least cut out half an hour. Because the book episodes, I try to stick to an hour. It was, the movies, there was definitely like a lot of like, I want to get this right. I need to make sure I do this justice, because people really, really care about the movies. Yeah.
Yeah. And I find that really amazing, because is that where you felt like you had the most growth in terms of audience for the podcast as you cover the movies?
Yeah, definitely. And I was really nervous actually when I was ending the movie coverage and I was going to be starting The Hobbit again. I was like, oh, it's going to suck. I'm going to go from having great numbers every week, and then it's just going to drop dramatically, because it's like, oh, great, now we're reading a book where literally nothing happened.
Yeah.
It's a big shift from Lord of the Rings to reading The Hobbit. And I was honestly really surprised. People stuck around to keep listening, and I was like, I guess they like hearing my like, and kind of answering like a earlier half of that question. People, and towards the beginning, I never really felt any kind of pressure to be like, oh, I have to cover it a certain way, or, oh, I have to like it, because the podcast was about my experience. And if I don't like something, I will say it, obviously. I'm not going to, I want it to be like authentic and realistic. I don't want to be like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever, I'm so excited about it. When in actuality, like, I hate Boromir. Like, you know.
Look, Boromir sucks, and we should just move on. Yeah. And so this is the other thing that I'm actually really personally interested in. How did you get like enough guests to, have a guest every episode as a solo podcaster?
So here's the thing that I will tell people, which is, if you are thinking of starting a podcast and you're like, I'm going to have a different guest on every week, my advice is to don't do that because it's very hard.
I've already made that mistake.
But the other half of that is, if you decide that is the path you want to do, I'm going to preface that with like, it is a lot more work than you might initially realize. And so you got to realize that before going into it. It's a lot. It's a lot of work. I'll be honest. It's a large portion of like my stress related to that's what I'm talking about comes from finding guests and scheduling them. And a couple, it was like, I would say like at the start of the year, I was having a grand old time scheduling people. I found I had like no problem finding people. And then through, I would say up until like chapter 9 of The Hobbit, I had people scheduled. I was like, awesome. And then the problem is that I started recording in advance, and then I didn't keep going with that schedule. And I eventually like caught up, and I was like, oh no, I have no guests slated.
Yeah.
And I reached out to, I was just trying to find people left or right. So the way that I find guests is I pretty much just go down any like internet or social media rabbit hole of like content creators or social media people or podcasters. I start out by like searching like geeky podcasts or like nerd, trying to find people in like a general nerd culture, like genre of the internet. I do a lot of like clicking on Instagram profiles, and then I'll maybe go to a guest I've already had on, and I'll click on Instagram and Twitter will show you like suggested followers based on that person. And so that could lead me to a podcast of a similar topic. And then I find those hosts. And so it's a lot of like just trying to make myself go down a rabbit hole of the internet. And then I send out the thing that like I had to get really comfortable with really quickly was just like shooting my shot. I just had to send a message, and a lot of times I don't hear back. That's the other thing is you have to get comfortable with either hearing no, but more often than not, I don't hear anything because I think a lot of times it'll go into their message requests, and so they don't see it. A lot of times it'll be sent to an email account that they no longer check, or they're just busy and they totally missed it. So I had to get really comfortable really fast with just sending messages to people all the time, just left and right sending messages and hoping. And I would say that like of all the messages I send, I probably hear back about like 60 or 70% of them. And then from those 60 and 70%, sometimes it's people being like, oh, thanks for reaching out, but I'm actually not really a Lord of the Rings fan. And I'll be like, oh, okay, thanks, whatever. And then from that, I have a lot of conversations that just go nowhere, and I will follow up multiple times and be like, hey, if you're still, people will be like, oh yeah, I would totally love to come on. I'm like, great. Are you available this date? And then they say nothing. And then I follow up again. And then they are like, oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm totally interested. And then I'm like, okay, what about this? And then it's a lot of that. And then eventually the conversation just dies out. So it is very hard. I don't want people to like get this idea that like, oh, I can start a podcast and I don't have anyone that I want to co-host with, but like, that's no problem. I'll just get guests on. It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. And like, even for myself, I have this master spreadsheet, which it's got pretty much everything in it. But the more I look at it, the more I go, I've just been relying on what's immediately around me. I have other people I'm reaching out to. But like, even when I sent Tyler Carlin a message the other day, asking him a quick favor, I was terrified. I'm like, Tyler is this huge like personality, and
no, he's not.
No, he's not. He's really nice. And I was like, I didn't expect him to reply within 2 minutes and just be totally on board. And I think that this is a really interesting thing. I'm always surprised. It depends on the content of the podcast, but the people who will be on board to chat with you on a podcast. I'm a journalist. People don't like speaking to me because often I come on and I ask people really hard questions. But when you sit down in a podcast format, people seem a lot more relaxed and just willing to just have a conversation, which I think is awesome.
Yeah,
I had Will, my brother, who lives in the middle of the desert, on the other day, and he would never be interviewed for something I do in terms of journalism, but more than happy to jump on the podcast. He does want to listen back to it because he feels like he was stupid, but that's just getting used to your voice thing. I suppose with Tolkien comes critique. And you and I, you've done a communications degree. I'm doing a communications degree. So we're very critical of the media that we consume. And with critique often comes hate. Can you explain?
Yes.
Or do you want to explain the hate that you got?
Yeah.
That was terrible, that period of time. I couldn't understand.
Yeah, it sucks. So, at the beginning of the podcast. And even like it was like several months into the movie coverage too, where I was like, I'm really lucky. I'm on the right side of the fandom. The people I interact with are always excited. Like going into it, I thought reaching out to all of these guys, kind of similar to what you were talking about with like how you were nervous to reach out to Tyler. I was like, oh, these people are going to be so judgmental of me, and they're going to be like, I'm better than you because I know all of Aragorn's names, and you know, and no one was like that at all. Everyone that I acted with, both like on my podcast and then just in general on social media, was always like, oh, that's so fun to hear that you're talking about this and reading it for the first time, and like, oh, that's a really funny meme. And I think people were excited to see that like I had this like fresh perspective to give, since I was reading it and experiencing it all for the first time. And
which is not something you see often, because like usually some people have had at least some experience with Lord of the Rings, and by extension things like Harry Potter as well.
Yeah. And so I think I got really like naive with that. And I posted a meme about how the fact that Éowyn killing the Witch King, like that's a great, awesome moment. Love it. Love to see it. But having one of three women in a movie franchise that is like 9+ hours of theatrical edition movie footage, and you have three named women who do something, and you have one of them pull off a helmet and say, I am no man, that does not make up for anything that, you know, that does not make up for the fact that you only have three named women. That does not make up for the fact that of those three women, one of them is dying for the majority of the movie. One of them only shows up in the first movie, and it's to help the all-male fellowship and like provide them refuge and give them gifts and equip them and uplift them on their journey. And so I made a meme about that and said, Éowyn killing the Witch King does not make up for, the lack of like female representation or something in Lord of the Rings. And people lost their minds. And I'm really lucky and fortunate that pretty immediately within a few hours, a lot of we have a separate Discord for WB&E creators. And they were talking about it, and they were like, we need to get like, this is unacceptable, because a lot of there are people in these comments who say that they were fans of Tyler and Ethan, and they were excited about this Lord of the Rings podcast until I opened my mouth, apparently. And they're like, we don't want to have hateful people listening to us and being like, well, I like Tyler and Ethan, but screw you. And so they came to my defense, and that was absolutely amazing. And it was great to see this flood of supportive comments and everything. But that was just kind of like the beginning of it, where I realized, I was like, okay, these fans do still exist. This like toxic side of the fandom that so then, I don't know, it just kind of continued from there with a couple different posts. I had a TikTok where, I made a TikTok, and on the TikTok side of things, it went great. And it was about like, it was like when you fall in love with your gardener, but he comes back from the end of the world and marries the barmaid and not you. And on TikTok, people liked it, and then I posted it to my Instagram reels, and people did not like it. And people got very defensive and were like, they're not gay, and talking about like going back to like the original text, and they're like, Tolkien was a Roman Catholic, he would hate this, and blah. And, you know, and I'm like, it doesn't matter what Tolkien wanted or intended. I am not Tolkien. I'm going to interpret it however way I want to. And then I had a TikTok. This was the one that I was like, okay, I think I'm done posting. I think I'm just going to post surface level funny Lord of the Rings things for a while. I posted a TikTok because people were like, oh, well, the reason there aren't that many women in Lord of the Rings is because it had to be historically accurate. And I was like, historically accurate to what? Middle Earth is a made up place. He did not have to make it historically accurate to anything. He could have made this land to be where it's a matriarchy and women are in power, but he didn't. And this also isn't about saying that like Tolkien should have been more woke and everything.
No, yeah.
It's about accepting the reality of what the text is, which is that it is about white men. And people got very angry about that. And I used the phrase white men, and people were like accusing me of being a white savior. And I was like, the only reason I included white in that instead of just saying Lord of the Rings is about men is because I wanted to acknowledge that it's not just women who have been left out of this fantasy story. It's also people of color. It's a lot of other people as well. And my perspective, like from then going forward, is that people look at Lord of the Rings and they look at Tolkien's works as this foundation for fantasy. And fantasy, it's not about going back in time and changing Lord of the Rings where Aragorn is a lesbian woman, you know, a black lesbian. It's not about doing that. It's about looking at this text. You can still enjoy it, but you have to recognize where it has fallbacks. You have to recognize where it has poor representation or harmful representation. And doing that is in the hopes that future works of fiction will be better where Lord of the Rings was not.
Yeah. And I think it comes back to this really interesting conversation that everyone seems to be having now, especially in the light of Voldemort and everything that's been happening there. It is, once you have something that's released in the world, it's released into the world. You will have critique, you will have praise, you will have, you know, whatever. You have interpretations, but it's in the world. Like, that's it. You can't change what that work of fiction is anymore, but we can use it, critique it, enjoy it, very importantly, enjoy it, and then let ourselves be guided by some of the lessons we learn along the way. There's no point, at least in my mind, I view films as a form of escapism for me. Like when I view a film, I don't want to be distracted by anything else. But that doesn't mean that I can't be critical about it. Or, what was that film that got all the backlash for the autism? It's done by Sia.
I don't remember what it's called, but I know it stars Maddie Ziegler.
Yeah. Anyway, I watched that in the cinema with one of my friends, and we have, a friend on the spectrum. Very interesting because everyone seemed to, for the politics of it, everyone seemed to really hate it. But my friend and I walked out of that, it was a beautifully shot film, really beautiful. And it justified some of our feelings and some of our experiences we had with our really close friend who was on the spectrum. And, it... Not to say that that piece of media is perfect or we should be holding it up for, a blanket statement for what it is. But that film really allowed me to look at the last 7 years of my relationship with this friend and go, I understand. I understand so much more than I was when I was 12 and couldn't understand why this girl was crying in the corner because someone had made a loud noise. Or when I was 17, I couldn't understand why she was mad at me when I had just not stuck to the routine, and those really important things that you've got to keep an eye on when you work with people who are on the spectrum. And it really helped me understand. And, I texted her after watching that film and going, I was thinking of you. And it's just, you can't, like, obviously, you've got to be critical, but at the same time, it doesn't mean you can't enjoy it or can't get something out of it.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. Yeah. If you're, if you walk out of a movie theater and you're able to take away an important lesson or something from that, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But it's for all media consumption, I think it's about finding you need to where you are enjoying something and you're like learning, taking like lessons from that and everything, and you're connecting with characters. I think it's also just so important to look at it from a more critical perspective and be like, well, how is someone who is not me, how would someone who lives a life differently from me interpret this?
100%. Yeah. I recently rewatched Lord of the Rings with some friends of mine, and watching it, and I got bored because there was nothing interesting happening because it was all white men. There was like obviously, you know, it's a great tale and very beautifully shot, and you know, New Zealand is amazing, but it was also quite boring to like visually boring.
Well, that was my first experience with the movie, with Fellowship of the Ring. Before I had started the podcast or anything, I had to watch Fellowship of the Ring for a film class in college.
Yeah.
And I watched it and I was like, I just don't care about any of this. There's so many characters. They all look the same. I was like, in my head, Boromir and Aragorn, like until I read the book or anything, Boromir and Aragorn were the same person. I was like, I know there's Gandalf, and I know that Orlando Bloom is an elf, and in my head, like all of the hobbits could have been Frodo, and I wouldn't have like noticed a difference. And the first time watching it, I just didn't care for it. And that was part of like the interesting thing about going into the podcast was like, I was like, I do have a little bit of a preconceived notions of this because of that experience from watching the movie. And so I was like, will that change any of it or something? And, you know, obviously it did, because the movies were much more enjoyable the second time around. But I was like, am I going to hate this again? Or, and if I do hate it, is that going to be like miserable for me to keep recording about a subject material that I hate? So I'm relieved at least that, you know, we were talking earlier about like, do I like Lord of the Rings? I definitely don't hate it. And I do enjoy experiencing it. So at least there's that.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I struggle the whole idea of reviews on like, even on like, for example, Amazon. I struggle with that because I go, your experience is not going to be the same as mine. So, you know, not discounting other people's experiences, but going, how can I know that is the same experience I'm going to have unless, you know, I have a go at it or, you know, and so, you know, props to you for, you know, not having the greatest experience with Lord of the Rings and then going on and, you know, having a whole podcast about it.
Yeah, I was like, if anything, this will be interesting.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And so have some of the experiences you've had while, you know, starting a podcast and, you know, dealing with hate and reading a prolific series, has that transferred to like your day-to-day life? Have you noticed where, you know, you've gone, oh, I'm using this skill that I actually learnt while I was learning how to podcast?
I don't know. I don't think so because the podcast and everything has become so routine for me that it's just kind of like become a part of my life and doing things like, I went on vacation 2 weeks ago. And I am recording for a next episode 2 days from now, but I haven't read a chapter of The Hobbit recently. And so there is something in the back of my brain being like, I feel like I should be reading The Hobbit or something, you know, I feel like there's something missing. So I think that might become more evident if the time ever comes where I stop podcasting, where I'm like, oh, this is something that like I was doing in my everyday life that I'm no longer doing. And now like, I notice when I'm not doing like these certain things or I'm not doing these certain routines. But I definitely don't like pick up a book that's not Lord of the Rings and, you know, read it as diligently as possible. If anything, I'm a terrible reader of non-Tolkien things. Like it's taking me it takes me forever to just finish a regular book.
Yeah.
Because I think in my brain, I'm like, there's no pressure to read this book, so I can pick it up and read it at whatever pace I want. And then I end up not picking it up at all.
Yeah, I have that same thing. When I was in high school, my mother banned me from reading books through the school term because I would read so much I wouldn't actually get my work done. And then so I stopped reading, and I've just come out. I came out of high school the end of 2019, and had obviously the pandemic last year. But like at the same time, I've tried to get back into reading, knowing that it's really good. And so, my friends Taylor and Charlie have a great podcast of The Eldest Gods about the Percy Jackson series. And I do remember really loving those books. But unfortunately, at home, I only have one of them. So I only had The Lightning Thief. So I read up to where the podcast was at, and then I just couldn't stop reading. I'm like, wow, this hasn't gone away. I've got to stop reading now. I've got work to do. And I'm about to buy the whole set. All of the books, all the Rick Riordan books.
Wait, how many are there? How many are there? 36.
Yeah.
Counted them myself.
25 books, I believe.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
For $150. And I'm like,
actually, I will say that something that has kind of affected my life because of the podcast is now that whenever I see something related to Tolkien or Lord of the Rings in real life, I have this instinct to be like, I think I need to get that in case I need it for the podcast in the future.
Yeah.
Literally today, just before we sat down to record, I was at a thrift store, and in their video game section, I saw Lord of the Rings. And so I was like, what is this? And so I picked it up, and it was a PC game it was like Shadow of Angmar, I think is what it said. I don't even know how long ago that was, but I don't have a PC, so I wouldn't be able to play it anyway. And I don't even think it was the full game. It said something. I couldn't figure out if it was, I think it was like a sample or like a demo version of that game, because it said something like 14-day free trial, and I don't know. But I had that instinct where I was like, oh, Lord of the Rings, pick it up, look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever I'm in bookstores now, I always go to the Tolkien section to see what's there. Is there some random Tolkien book that I don't know about that I should know about for the future? I bought a parody copy of Lord of the Rings called Board of the Rings.
Yes.
And I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but I have it.
It's there.
So, I do have an instinct to constantly be I'm always there is something in the back of my mind that's always on the lookout for is this something that I need to pay attention to for the future of the podcast? Yeah,
no, definitely. I definitely go, even for other projects, I'll be walking around and you look at something and go, oh, I should do something with that, or I should buy that. We went to the bookstore yesterday. I was helping my brother buy a puzzle for his 18th, because he's really into puzzles at the moment. And it's very funny. You said that your bookstore had a Tolkien section. I don't think my bookstore has a Tolkien section.
Well, I say Tolkien section. I go to, the fantasy genre, and then I find tea, and then there's usually a shelf that has it's just all Tolkien.
Wow. That's even better than the bookstore. The bookstores in Australia are kind of dying.
Oh, that's a bummer.
They're crashing and burning. There's one line of bookstores that I really, really like. And we went to that particular bookstore yesterday. But I went there and was just having a sticky beak at their fantasy section because like reading fantasy, and I saw all the Percy Jackson, but then I looked. I don't know whether you've heard of Ando, but he's this he's this Vietnamese refugee who lives here in Australia, very famous in Australian culture. He's written a whole slew of children's books called Weirdo and Hot Dog and Ninja Kid, and there's these great beginner books. and they were sitting beside, Rick Riordan and the Harry Potter books. I'm like, wow, we've really condensed like the fantasy or children's books category into this one big section.
Well, I hope that the bookstores have a comeback in Australia then.
Support your local bookstore.
Yeah.
Also, the other thing that your podcast really taught me was support your local library. That was
well, that's what's so funny is that came just so. It was like towards the beginning I was in the transition from moving from my parents' house to my apartment, and I wasn't sure what the situation was going to be like at my new apartment yet, and so I just booked this room in a public library, and it was one of the it was a newer location that had like just recently been built, and I walked in and I was like, oh my god, this is beautiful. Oh my god,
libraries are amazing.
Yeah. And I it just like really brought back this like childlike sense of wonder of like, you mean to tell me I can take any of these books home and I don't have to pay for them? That's amazing.
Yeah.
So there was also one summer where I was an intern for our county's like video production services, and they were doing a segment about one of the new public libraries that had opened. And so there were all these video clips that we had in interviews we were doing with the librarians there about like the services that they offer. And it just like really opened my eyes to how, at least in the United States, to how many resources a good public library has, and it makes things so much more accessible. A lot of like newer, nicer, because there are like, depending on, this goes back to like, our country was founded on the backs of people that we enslaved, where there are certain areas in every city where it's always going to be more impoverished. I don't even think I said that word. That was I don't know what word I just said. Impoverished. They're
impoverished.
I know how to spell it. But anyway, like I see it in my head, but when I impoverished, that doesn't sound. Anyway, if you go to those areas, those libraries are not going to be as nicely. They're not going to have as nice resources as, for instance, this library that. We were doing this like video segment about, where they had a whole like brand new state of the art media center. It had like a 3D printer. They had like microphones that you could use to make your own podcast. Wow. They had like a green screen and like they had all this equipment that you could just come in and use. And I was like, that's amazing that people who don't have access to these kinds of things can just come in here. They can, schedule, an hour for the media lab at the library and come in, and they can make a podcast, or they can make a YouTube video, or they can, practice editing with a video software that they can't afford to buy themselves. And I was like, this is awesome. More people should go to the library.
Moral of the podcast: go to
the library. As Hermione Granger says, when in doubt, go to the library.
Yeah. I had an interview with someone a couple months ago near where my grandparents live, and I work about half an hour away from where my grandparents live, which happens to be near where my parents live, but I live right in the centre of the city. So I had gone out for this interview early in the morning and had about 3 hours to kill and an assignment to write. So I went to the library close to work, and I just sat in there. And, like, there was barely anyone in there. It was really quiet. I just sat on the floor, put my computer on charge. Which, side note, I hate when, like, wall sockets are too low for my MacBook charger to plug in. So the way that Australian plugs look, they're like this. So they got an angle to it. So you can only put it in one way. And one way only. So what that means is, if it's sitting really low, my MacBook charger, which has got the big brick on it, won't plug in.
I gotcha.
So, like, trying to find a plug in, like, a library where all of them are running along the floor, it's like, But yes, it was. I sat in the library and I just got work done, and I was like, I've just been really productive. I should just go to the library more often. And where I live, the library sits inside, so it's a big shopping centre with a train station and like a residential apartment. And the library sits in that big building. I've never gone, only because somehow I don't, like, if I go, I'll go to the university library, not my library, the local library. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, a library is so good. It's just so quiet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
100%.
Awesome.
I also want to give a like PSA. Like, this podcast is not sponsored by these apps, but like it should be, because everyone should know about these apps. There, at least for the US, there's I believe it started as an app called Overdrive.
Yeah,
and
Overdrive.
then it has kind of like since branched off into a different app that I think is more like user friendly, called Libby.
Yeah,
and
they both
you
exist
can
here in Australia.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, so you can, if you have a library card, you can connect it. You can connect, like, create a profile on this app, and you can like check out audiobooks and ebooks. And I think that just like, also there's just within like internet reading culture and like book talk, like the book side of TikTok, there's this like impression, I think, that you have to buy books.
Yeah.
You have to, and like, of course it's great to like support your local bookstore or to buy a book of an author that you really like. That's great, do that whenever possible. But there's this like financial pressure that like you have to own like shelves and shelves and shelves of books. And that's not feasible for everyone. And so just a reminder that like there's absolutely nothing wrong with going to the library and checking out a bunch of books and using that for, if you like make a reading challenge for yourself for the year, you don't have to buy those
100%.
books. You can just get them. You can rent them and it won't cost any money.
Yeah. And an extra app I will plug will be an app called BorrowBox. I don't know whether it works in America, but all the ABCs, who are our public broadcaster, they do a lot of audiobooks. All the ABC's audiobooks are on that one, and you just sign up with your local library. And it's all free. The other thing I really love is I went looking, so because you can only borrow out audiobooks, there's always a long line for the Harry Potters. So Castbox is where I go and listen to my version, that version of Harry Potter. It's the Stephen Fry one. It's just as good, but I listen there because it's free and I can access it whenever I want.
Yeah, and supposedly Spotify is putting audiobooks up, not just for books that have gone out of public domain, but I've seen videos on TikTok of people sharing like there are just audiobooks on like that exist in the form of like playlists for like chapter 1, chapter 2 for like newer books too.
Wow.
So none of those are coming to mind off the top of my head right now, but like Spotify also has audiobooks on there, so there should never be this like there should never be any like barriers to people wanting to be able to read or consume other stories.
Yeah, and if you're like struggling to read, or for example, may have dyslexia, or just are a busy person in general, audiobooks are obviously is the best way that I find.
Audiobooks are dope.
I know, they're so good. The only problem with audiobooks I find is I confuse them with podcasts. So I will often spend months listening to podcasts, not realizing that I've got audiobooks I should be listening to, or spend months listening to audiobooks and then let the podcasts pile up until my phone storage is almost out and I've got to listen to podcasts again. It's
just an endless cycle.
Yeah, it is an endless cycle. I've had to go back to trying to read some version of a physical book just so I can save the storage on my phone. Is there anything else that I have missed or that you want to chat about?
I do, just because I was like, I was kind of like intense about what it's like to have guests on every
Yeah.
episode. I do want to share like the flip side of that coin, which is that it's a really wonderful experience when I
It's beautiful.
when
yeah.
I once I had, aside like scheduling and coordination and communicating aside, it's been amazing to get to speak to different people pretty much different people every week, to get to hear their perspectives, and that like a lot of people have very different stories and experiences for like how they came to find Lord of the Rings or whatever it is we're talking about. And that's been like a really enjoyable experience about everything, is getting to talk to all these different people who have all these different perspectives that I could never give to this series.
Yeah. And I feel like being able to chat about it in the context of, reading Tolkien for the first time, or just using Tolkien as like a framework to then talk about, literary experiences. And guests always bring so much awesome energy to a podcast, I find. Whenever I listen to your podcast, it's always got a great energy. Although, I do have to say my favourite episodes are the ones with you, Ethan and Tyler. Just the chaotic energy just makes me chef's kiss.
Oh, man. Well, then you're going to enjoy the restricted section next. Well, by the time this comes out,
the movie one with Ethan,
we recorded, and Haley and I have very differing opinions of the Prisoner of Azkaban movie, so like that was chaotic energy on its own. Recording with those two fools is always fun. Always a fun time.
They're awesome. Thank you so much for coming on Content and Capable, Mary Clay.
Thank you for having me on. It was great to chat with you.
Yeah, it was awesome. Where can do you have any plugs?
As we discussed thoroughly, I have a podcast called That's What I'm Talking About. And there are new episodes every Tuesday wherever you get podcasts. And you can follow me on Twitter at MCWhatsup. That is also my TikTok handle. And you can follow me on Instagram at MC Turn Down for What. Yeah, I had to go over that in my head. I was like, as I was saying the words, I was like, I don't think that's right, but it is. Yeah.
And is there anything that you've been viewing, listening, or watching that you want to plug?
I'm trying to think of something that's not Bo Burnham's new special. But I'll just go ahead and plug that. I plugged it on the restricted section. My For You page on TikTok. Like, I've screen recorded a couple different videos where I just scroll, and like several videos in a row are about it. If you haven't watched Bo Burnham's new special, Inside, it's on Netflix. I'll give like a general warning that it's not necessarily a comedy special. It's like a very dark, it has a lot of dark humor to it, which is kind of, I think people who know Bo Burnham would expect that ahead of time. Like I didn't start it being like, oh, this is going to be a really fun time. It's going to be a great comedy special. I knew going into it that I would be messed up, and I was, but in a good way. Yeah, it was just like I think it was just so unique and cool and different what he did as a creator and as like a comedian / performance artist. And if you haven't watched it yet, go watch it. Unless you don't want to, in which case that's okay.
Yes, no, I am a big fan of Bo Burnham's work. I think he is a really awesome comedian who always seems to be pushing the line between what is really quite heavy stuff and then real life and comedy. So I think it's really, really great. I can't wait to go and sit down and watch it. I just haven't gotten the chance since it was released, unfortunately. Yeah.
Also, it is an hour and a half long. His other, like, a usual comedy special is about an hour. Yeah. So it is a little bit longer. There is a little bit more of a commitment. But and if you've like never listened to any of Bo Burnham's stuff and you're like, oh well, people are talking about this special, maybe I should watch it. I'd actually recommend watching one of his other specials, maybe
Yeah,
in
100%.
particular, watch Make Happy first.
Oh, yeah,
Because
definitely.
that'll kind of introduce you to like his type of humor. And like get you acclimated to that so that when you watch Inside, you're not like...
I have no idea what I'm going to plug today. I'm trying to scroll. I'm going to quickly
What
load
have you...
up.
What podcast, what audiobooks are you doing? What TV shows are going on?
Yeah, this is like the problem. What have... no. You know what I'm going to pit... what I'm going to plug? I'm going to plug Community. Because of what has happened in the last 3 days, Community is just this embodiment of pure chaos, which is my family, and I cannot recommend it enough. It is the pure embodiment of just how messy life is. And dealing, like, even like when we're talking about dealing with haters as well, and, you know, building up these awesome friendships. I love Community. I'm in the middle of rewatching it for, I think, the 3rd time. And I just put it on in the background and let it play, because I pretty much know when everything's happening. Anyway, is there anything else? Oh, you can find me on the internet. I'm Sam. You can find me at sam.the.journalist on Instagram and TikTok. And you can also find me at samobjournalist on Twitter. Not that I do a lot on Twitter. Maybe that will change. I'm not sure. I'm very worried because that is my professional Twitter account. And as a journalist, you should be very careful what you put on there. But yeah, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Mary Clay. And yeah, sorry.
It was a great time. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, it was awesome to hear your perspective about reading a prolific series. I always am amazed by your courage to just get up there and put your experience on the internet.
Well, thank you.
So
That's
you.
really cool to hear.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for listening to Content and Capable. You can follow the podcast socials at Content, the letter N, Capable on Instagram and Twitter. You can send a super boring email to us through contentandcapablepod@gmail.com. The art was done by Opia. You can follow them on Opia_art on Instagram. Opia is spelled OPIA. Feel free to message them about making art for your project. Our music was written, recorded, and edited by Nora Strauss-Riggs. You can find Nora at Kane_I, that's I as in the body part, on Instagram and Twitter. Feel free to message her about making music for your project or editing your podcast. I'm proud to be a part of the Movie Night Crew Network, which features the Restricted section, a chapter-by-chapter Harry Potter pod with lots of spoilers all the time. The Movie Night Crew joins some friends as they react to some terrible, some meh, and some really great movies. Fandoms Gone Wrong, a show that discusses all things fandoms. Of the Eldest Gods, a chapter-by-chapter Rick Riordan pod full of myths and legends. And My Cabbages, an Avatar podcast that follows the true hero of Avatar The Last Airbender, the Cabbage Cart Guy.
Coffee, tea, honor, cabbage. Long ago, the 4 elements lived in harmony. Then, shit went totally cray when the Avatar attacked. Only the Cabbage Man, merchant of fine cruciferous vegetables, could stand against his trolling. But when the world needed some dank veg, he vanished. 10 years have passed, and my partner and I have started a new podcast.
My Cabbages! An Avatar podcast.
A weekly show about Avatar The Last Airbender. Whether it's Sokka's new line of cologne...
Hey, look at you, sitting there on a seal. Well, now look back at me. I'm on an even bigger seal. Now look away.
D&D related antics.
You have to make an acrobatics check for that, and Aang just like unzips his pants and whips out his d20s. He's just like, I got this.
Or randomly breaking into song.
Go bending waterfall.
We'll stumble our way through the greatest show ever made, one episode at a time.
You can reach us at CabbageCast, which is our Twitter, or
Subscribe wherever you catch pod.
Rotten cabbage!
cabbages? What kind of slum do you think this is?
Content and Capable is a podcast all about answering the question, how do you adult? Don't forget to rate and review it on your favourite podcatcher, and I will see you next Monday for another episode.
That movie sucked. I kind of liked it.
Movie Night Crew Network.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording now before I say anything more embarrassing.